I guess. So,
Okay.
okay.
Thank you. The technology goddesses are with us tonight. So I want to welcome everybody to this evening's program, Third Thursday, Exploring the Outdoors. My name is Barbara Dickinson. I'm the Executive Director of the Friends of the Handley Regional Library, who are one of the sponsors of this wonderful program, this wonderful series of programs. The Friends have been around since 1977 to support the public library system, the Handley Library in downtown Winchester, the Bowman Library in Stevens City, and the Clark County Library in Berryville. We support the library through raising funds sometimes, but have always been involved with bringing amazing programs like this to our community for free, to inform, to entertain, and keep us curious about things we enjoy or learn a little bit more about something we want to know more about, like the outdoors in our own area. So I encourage you to go to your public library, check out a book or a DVD, find out a little bit more information about hiking or about exploring the outdoors. I also want to encourage you to visit our friends at Mountain Trail Store in downtown Winchester on Front Royal. They are also a sponsor of this series. Just a little bit of etiquette. I encourage you to type questions into the chat feature, either through Zoom or Facebook, however you are joining us this evening. And about 7:30 this evening, we'll get to the Q&A area and be able to bring those questions out to our amazing guests that we have with us this evening. One other little bit of housekeeping, we will be transferring this program to the YouTube channel, storing it on the Handley Regional Library webpage. So you can come back and watch it again. Let a friend know if they weren't able to join us tonight that they can find this episode of Third Thursday and all of the episodes of Third Thursday on the Handley Regional Library YouTube channel. So now it's my pleasure and honor to introduce tonight's host, and she will introduce our guests. Susan Shearhart is a lifelong hiker and camper. She calls herself a nature nerd. She's a wonderful source of great ideas for programs that we brought for this series as we've gone along throughout this year. So it's my honor and pleasure to have her come on and host this program this evening and introduce our guest tonight. So Susan Shearhart, take it away.
Thanks, Barbara, and thanks for the introduction. It's always a pleasure to join you and thank the Handley Regional Library System for giving us this opportunity to explore the outdoors, particularly here in this beautiful valley that we live in. And tonight, as the title suggests, we're going to explore the outdoors when you have physical limitations. And this idea came about because in almost every segment prior to this one, we have talked about injuries that our various guests have experienced, how that impacted how they were experiencing the outdoors and how they resumed their passion. So you might remember our first two guests, both thru hikers, both had to get off trail during their epic thru hikes because of an injury. One had a stress fracture in her foot, and the other, not only him, but also his dog, they both had to get off trail to have surgery. And gratefully, they all recovered and were able to resume and finish their thru hike of the Appalachian Trail. We also had two cyclists on our program for segment 3 who, gentlemen who've been cycling their whole lives and are now in their senior years and have experienced some nasty spills on their bikes. One even broke his collarbone. And they've recovered and they're back cycling, but they have changed a bit how they train. The bikes they're riding, they've actually changed to be more adaptive, to give them a greater sense of balance. Maybe have changed the routes they're riding, maybe ones that don't have more treacherous gravel sections or things like that. We've also had Lisa Klepp, who climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, talk about her training regimen and to try to prepare her body for the rigors of the extreme conditions that she was going to experience in Mount Kilimanjaro. And then she shared how that trek did impact her and the medication she had to take and how much water she had to take and why she had to hike extremely slowly as they went up that mountain, and what the recovery period was like and why gear selection was so important. And so we thought with all of that information that was shared so graciously by our prior guests that maybe we should explore being in the outdoors with physical limitations that perhaps are more chronic. So tonight we have with us, I've asked Andrea Schweigert, who's a physical therapist, so she will be our expert tonight, and she resides in Broadway, Virginia. She graduated from the University of Vermont with a BS in physical therapy in 1988 and has also served us in the Air National Guard in the field of occupational health. So Andrea, thank you for that service. She moved for Virginia and she's worked in a wide variety of settings, including large and small acute care hospitals, outpatient clinics, skilled nursing facilities, and in-home healthcare. Her favorite areas of interest within physical therapy are prosthetics and wound care. She is currently employed by Continuing Care Home Health, and she is an active member of the Page County Community Choir, the American Legion, and the Volunteer Rescue Squad as a driver and EMT. And she is also a very involved member of the Boy Scouts of America, where she's been a leader and a volunteer for the last 15 years, and she can be found very frequently up at Camp Rock Enid in Gore, Virginia, either in the kitchen or the health lodge. And she's also a trainer of wilderness first aid. So Andrea, thank you for joining us this evening. Our other two guests are going to be sharing personal stories of their own journeys with health conditions. Christine Villataro is a lifetime hiker and camper and has a love of the outdoors that was imbued with her by her parents, and which she has shared with her own children. She's very involved with the hiking community, and she has found that that has been a great source of healing for her, having experienced several, losses in her life. She has founded and guides for a local women's hiking group, the Wandering Soul Sisters. She's an ambassador for several other hiking groups. She is the supervisor of outreach for the Potomac Appalachian Trail Club, and she has also been very instrumental in setting up their Blue Ridge chapter, which is a part of the Potomac Appalachian Trail and services the northern Shenandoah Valley area. She has had such great success in the outdoors that she's decided to change her career and move to becoming an outdoor therapeutic recreation therapist, and recently became certified as a forest therapy guide. This is very interesting to see that somebody's passion has now been able to transfer into your professional life, so that's wonderful. And last we have Melissa, who is also a lifelong outdoor enthusiast. She was a Girl Scout. She enjoys hiking, cycling, and looking at other outdoor pursuits like paddling, which she recently experimented with great success. She's an artist and has created art inspired by the things that she sees, hears, and feels in nature. And she's also a member of a local women's hiking group and spends a lot of time on the trails. And I have to say that I have spent a lot of time with each of these women, whether it's on the trail or in camp or serving our hiking community and our youth in the community. So I thought we would start with you, Christine, and if you would like to share a bit about your chronic condition, maybe briefly describe what it is and how the symptoms and how it impacts your physical activity. And yeah, why don't we just start with that small piece, okay?
Well, I have arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis. I've had arthritis probably since my early 20s. It hasn't started getting bad probably, I would say, in my 30s, early 40s, and has gotten progressively worse. More so, like, I've noticed it like in my hip, because I'm actually having to have my hip replaced soon. So I notice as far as my activity goes, I'm still able to get out there. However, I've always been a slow hiker, but I'm extremely slow now, and I have to be careful of like the areas that I hike, making sure I'm able to lift my leg up high enough to get onto some of the rocks and that. So it's kind of curtailed some of the things that I love to do. But however, I'm still trying to get out there and do what I can on the good days, and on the bad days, I'll just go and sit and just be nice in nature and just have that quiet time in nature. But like, it has progressively gotten worse. Even, I'm hoping once I'm able to have surgery, that will relieve some of it. About 2.5 years ago, I was able to hike up to 10 miles. I mean, like I said, I'm not a fast hiker, but I was able to get out there and get it done. And of course, I lost a child in 2019, and I think that had a lot, the stress of losing a child and just everything, the emotions, everything. I think that basically contributed to the just my body just kind of breaking down even more. Um, I was able, it was funny because about 2 months after she died, I was able to I was able to complete a section of the AT basically from Route 55 to Route 50. And then that was it. That's when, like, after that, I noticed that it's basically like, maybe a hike 2 miles, and I'd get to a halfway point and I'm like, my leg is really starting to hurt. I don't even know if I'm going to get back. I've tried, well, first, before I got diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, because I already knew I had arthritis. I was thinking like, well, maybe it's, my leg, maybe it's stress. So I went through acupuncture. I went through uh, massage therapy, PT, and like they were treating the symptoms. They weren't treating what was actually causing it. So, it, for a while it worked, but then it stopped. And then it got progressively worse. But like I said, I try to get out there when I can. And then when I can't, I do other things.
I think I was wondering, when were you, so you said that initially you knew you had arthritis, but then it was diagnosed as rheumatoid. What was that time span in there between those two different diagnoses?
Well,
Was
so
it...
I was diagnosed with arthritis in my neck in my early 20s. I've had issues all along, like with headaches, migraines, and that. And they did a CAT scan, the CAT scan of my neck and my head and that. And they were like, you have a lot of arthritis in your neck. And so, like,
Ouch.
my mom had rheumatoid arthritis, and it runs in my family. And then, I had been tested off and on, but it always came back like positive, negative, so we never really knew. And then about a year ago, my doctor sent me to an arthritis doctor in Fairfax, just because I was having a lot of issues. I was in a lot of pain. And that's when he said, no, you definitely have arthritis. And I have some other issues, like with my feet and that too, but they said it's all arthritis related.
Wow, so you really went for a long time period then, from the original diagnosis of just arthritis to them actually just discerning that it's actually rheumatoid.
Yeah.
So, and I, unfortunately, I hear that story a lot, that
Mhm.
that part of the journey itself and getting the right diagnosis can take a long time. I'm
Oh
even,
yeah.
for myself, trying to get diagnosed with, trying to figure out what was wrong with me and ultimately getting a Lyme diagnosis took years and years and years, which ultimately meant that I went undiagnosed, which meant I was untreated.
Mhm.
And so then the conditions deteriorate. And, sometimes you wonder, well, if I had gotten this diagnosis sooner, maybe something else would have happened. Maybe I wouldn't have gotten to such a state. Andrea, I wonder if you could jump in at this point and maybe give some tips for that part of the process for members of our audience, like when you're feeling these physical symptoms come on and something's wrong. What are some tips of what you can do to get the right person in the medical establishment to help you?
Sure. I think part of that is you are your best advocate, or should be your best advocate. You know your body, and you know when something's not right. So the things that are common, people that have pain like Christine and Susan having Lyme's disease often go undiagnosed, misdiagnosed, because the doctor says, well, this test was negative, but there are lots of false negative tests out there. And when something's persistent, it's not going away, we have pain. I tell patients all the time, that's your body's alarm system, and you know if you're feeling it or not. And there are, you know, lots of chronic diseases that people are not fully aware of and don't know how to ask for the right test. But I think the biggest thing is being persistent. If what either they're not listening to you or they're not testing you and coming up with an answer, you need to ask for a referral or find yourself a second opinion, and keep persisting towards finding an answer, especially with things like Lyme's disease. There are so many false negative tests with that category that it's just kind of scary. And you know, the longer you're undiagnosed, the longer you're not being treated, and the more permanent or more catastrophic changes there are that affect you on a day-to-day basis. So I think, you know, knowing your own body, knowing something isn't right, and being persistent. And like I said, if you're not getting what you need from the provider you're at, they're not listening to you, you need to go find another provider.
Good advice. Thank you, Andrea. You know, I thought, Christine, it was interesting from your story too, that you mentioned a number of different therapies that you explored and tried throughout your journey, and that some did help for a while, and then like you would move on to something else. I'm wondering, Andrea, if you could maybe talk a little bit about when you do get to that point with a therapist, and maybe it's progressive, different therapies, like as Christine has experienced. What are some good tips there too, or things to be aware of when you enter into those discussions to make sure that you're adequately prepared, or that the program that you come up with is going to be helpful, or when to be your own best advocate and say, hey, can we re-review this?
Sure. I think a lot of that is, of course, you need to be speaking with your physician, who's going to be hopefully your advocate, and the person ordering it, if it's a therapy that requires a prescription for you to be able to be covered by law, and or by your insurance company. If you're paying out of pocket, the rules are a little bit different in some states, but in general, you need that doctor's order to get therapy and have your insurance cover it. So you're looking at those kind of limitations. If you have an acute injury and you're going to a general therapist and treating symptoms, as Christine said, they were treating symptoms, not her disease process, that's a great thing. They can help you over that initial hump, get you through a recovery program, as long as it wasn't a chronic, long, drawn-out recovery kind of illness or injury. But if you're getting into something more chronic or specialized, then that's probably when you need to seek out a therapist or a provider of whatever intervention you're looking at that has some background in it, or at least knows what their limitations are and can refer you to somebody that is more specialized. There are people that are physical therapists that do what we call dry needling, very similar to acupuncture. There are massage therapists, and then there are therapists that do just massage. There are some that are more inclined to do sports therapy or therapeutic massage, which is a whole different program. And some of the therapists don't specialize in that kind of thing. So finding the provider, talking to your community, your doctor, people around you that have had therapy, finding out what kind of things have worked for them, and pursuing somebody that has a specialty is not a bad thing.
Well, that's great advice. Something to be asking when you meet with these different therapists is to find out their background, and if they have a specialty, or what experience they have with somebody with a condition similar to yours. And so I guess part of that is really understanding your situation, and not just the diagnosis, because you do need to understand, I guess, how that diagnosis is manifesting, or how that disease is manifesting within your body, because it does differ from person to person, because we're each unique individuals and may have other conditions that are also impacting your function. So that needs to be considered as well. I thought for a second, I'd like to pull Millie into the conversation for a moment. And Millie has experienced a catastrophic illness. And so, Millie, maybe if you could just describe your situation a little bit, maybe, and how that, of course, impacted your physical activity, but maybe a little bit just about the onset of symptoms, how you realized something was wrong, and the journey to diagnosis.
Well, I've always loved outdoors. I've tried to stay been active, although kind of off and on, because I've also kind of struggled with weight and body issues kind of my whole life. And, whenever I was having children, it was a little harder to get out and be as active as, I could have done more, I'm sure, but a lot of us fall into that habit. But as I was approaching my 50s, I started having like not as much energy as I had had before. And I was putting on weight, but it was a very slow process. And there were a lot of stressful things in my life at the same time. So I just kind of thought that age, weight gain, fatigue, and stress were all feeding on each other. I didn't think there was actually anything wrong, and that, every bit of that seemed minor enough that I'm not going to bother the doctor with that. They're just going to tell me to lose weight, reduce stress, get more active, and I know to do that. During this same time period, I lost both of my parents within 6 months. I had their estate to deal with 5 hours away. I had issues with my kids and custody with my ex and lots of stuff going on. But it finally got to the point where I really started feeling like there must be something more. And so, I went to my doctor, got kind of the, like, oh, you've put on 30 pounds since I saw you. And, it was focused very much on the weight being the issue. But when we really got more into it, I ended up with a diagnosis of uterine cancer, which is a very common cancer in women. Usually it's caught early and is cured with just a hysterectomy. But in my case, I needed more than just the hysterectomy. So this was now going right on 3 years ago, but I went through chemo and then radiation. And as I got the diagnosis, I really felt like there was a wait before I could get surgery, which was the first step. And that's very nerve-wracking when you're waiting months for something that is really important. But surgeons are very busy. That's our healthcare system. And so I started just wanting to get in the best shape I could before the surgery happened. So I did start making myself walk more, I was already not eating bad by American standards, but I got a lot more serious about what I was eating. And, so the surgery went well. I continued to exercise. And one thing I did, chemo scared me to death. I had some friends almost try to convince me to do it. Because I was afraid it was going to age me like 15 or 20 years and make me disabled. And so one thing I will say when you're facing any kind of serious condition is do a combination of listen to your doctor, but do your own research. It's kind of research and then verify, because I did a lot of research about my condition, and also about the treatments that I was going to go through. And what to expect, and also the potential side effects. Like the main chemo drug I was on is notorious for causing peripheral neuropathy, not just during treatment, but a lot of people end up with permanent peripheral neuropathy, which means that can mean anything from numbness and tingling in your hands and feet to excruciating pain and like debilitating inability to walk. And as a hiker, as an artist, what am I going to do if my hands and feet are messed up? That was terrifying. So I did a lot of research, but there's a lot of wacky stuff out there too. So I would research, find multiple sources, and then I would ask my doctor, here's some things I found. These are my sources. Is there anything to this? Some of it, he was like, oh, yes, that would be a good idea. Take B vitamins, take glutathione. You can do those things. Oh, yes, Claritin might help with deep-seated bone pain. Believe it or not, it's an over-the-counter allergy medicine, but it helps with the bone pain that you might get from chemo. One thing I found that he had never heard of before, but he said, well, it's not going to hurt you if you're careful with it. And I had found some evidence, and a little beyond anecdotal. There was one study in breast cancer patients, which wasn't my cancer, but there was one study in breast cancer patients that indicated that it might help. And that is during the chemo treatment, the infusions, to chill your hands and feet using ice packs, with the thought being that constricting your vessels in those areas would reduce the dose of the medicine that gets to your nerves. So I did not find out about that until after my first infusion. And after my first infusion, I really had bad neuropathy, nerve pain. I was in agony. And I started doing that afterwards. And I did have tingling. I did have some of that pins and needles stuff, but it didn't last. But it didn't last the whole time. It would be for a few days after. And thankfully, I got through all the 4-month course of treatment, and I do not have any permanent pain from it. I don't have any tingling. I may have a little bit of reduced sensitivity in my toes, but it's nothing that is clinically like verifiable. So, according to the doctors, I have no side effects. According to me, I want to be a little more careful as I step, but maybe at my age, I would be that way anyway. So I guess my thing, in terms of treatment and a diagnosis, for me, at least, having as much information as possible. Information is power, but research, then verify before you go, flying off to Nepal to drink dew off of a tree or something like that, because you'll find all kinds of wacky things out there. So I guess that was kind of my thing. And I was determined I found in the months leading up between my diagnosis and starting treatment, I found that nothing helped my mental health better than getting out in nature and walking.
Yeah.
What that does mentally and emotionally was wonderful. And I was determined to keep doing that as I went through treatment. I actually left every chemo infusion. They pump you up with all kinds of drugs to keep you from reacting horribly to the medicines. And those will last about 2.5 days. So right after an infusion, I felt great. And I would immediately go and walk in a park for 2 miles. And I figured that also was helping the medicine circulate well through my system, to find anything that the surgery had missed, which was the purpose of me doing it. And it also would, by circulating, would also help my liver and my kidneys start processing it and protecting me from the negative effects. And, I did time it. So I always did infusions on Fridays. I realized that Sunday afternoon I was going to crash and feel really bad for a day or two. So I would get up Sunday morning and go on a not really long, but like about a 4-mile hike, not on any rough terrain, but I wanted to crank out the mileage. And and then I'd come home. I was going to be tired anyway. So the tired from the hike combined with the crash from the chemo pre-meds wearing off, I deserved a rest the rest of the day. But having those regular normal length hikes in there was also a really emotionally affirming thing, because it reminded me that, I'm still me. I still have this body. I can do this. Now, I'm also going to say, with chemo and cancer treatments or any like illness like that really rocks your world, everybody's going to be different, not everybody's going to be able to go hike 4 miles 2 days after having chemo. But I think, our bodies, the human body is made to move. So as much as you can do. In online forums about people undergoing similar treatments, I would see so many people say, oh, I'm tired. I can't wait till treatment's over so I can start recovering and start walking. But right now I don't have the energy. And, in as nice a way as I could muster, I would say, don't wait till it's over. You're getting deeper and deeper into a hole as you wait. Try to at least maintain where you are. Do what you can. You will find if you move, if you get out there, even if it's just around the block, it'll be better in the long run, I think. But again, that's me, a relatively healthy except overweight, a 50 something. And it's going to be different when someone's older or someone's diagnosis is terminal and it's not just chemo to catch anything that surgery didn't. But for me, it really helped. The outdoors, the physical activity really got me through it, and I've been fine since. I've recovered. I'm hiking, loving life, gained a lot more appreciation of just how beautiful and wonderful both the natural world is and every day that we have here to appreciate it and participate in it. So anyway, that's kind of what I bring to this whole discussion is research, verify, move as much as you can, and get outside, because you want to protect your mental health in times like that as much as you can as well.
Great, thank you for sharing that, Melly. I think it's interesting in hearing both your and Christine's stories is that both of you had an appreciation for the outdoors and spent time in the outdoors. And even with a chronic condition or when you were diagnosed with this catastrophic condition, you never stopped going out into the outdoors. And it seems like from both of your stories, the nature provided a very healing aspect of your journeys as well. And I think that's an important thing to talk about. Maybe we'll do a segment in the future just focusing on that topic of being in the outdoors for that emotional healing that you can find in the outdoors. I also think it's interesting that you included hiking as a part of your recovery program. You actually got active prior to your surgery. You wanted to be in better physical condition for that, and then you continued moving through all of your treatments. It was interesting how you timed your hikes, knowing how you were going to feel throughout each cycle of chemo that you received. And the same with Christine too, how you talk about good days and bad days, and so you make accommodations for that, but you don't stop. And I think that's a really important lesson to share with everyone, is that to keep moving, even if it's, even if you're only going a mile today and you're going really slow, that's okay. Or maybe, after my Lyme diagnosis, and I was basically bedridden for a while, but when I could finally get out of bed, I might only make it to the driveway to get in my car to take my kids to school. Or my first hike was a quarter mile, and I did that day after day after day until I could go a half mile. And I did that for a couple of weeks until I could go, maybe a little further. And it did take a couple of months before I could do a mile or a mile and a half. But I think it was that consistency and the persistence to keep going. I also wanted to talk a little bit with Andrea about, it was interesting to hear your both experiences and how you incorporated exercise, but maybe Andrea, maybe you want to talk a little bit about just that process as well in creating a program and knowing your limits, or knowing, how to work with your therapist in creating those programs.
Sure. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, part of your limits, of course, are if you have a referral from a physician or if you have insurance coverage versus not having insurance coverage. Knowing whether you have unlimited number of visits with your therapist or your insurance is going to authorize 8 visits, and making sure that you have a candid conversation with that provider about how you would like to most efficiently use your visits or use your funds so that you can space them out and get the maximum benefit from it. Obviously, you need a very thorough evaluation with your current diagnosis from the doctor. They need to know about your other medical conditions and how your current problems are affecting or being affected by those other medical conditions. You need to then have a conversation about what your goals are versus a therapist. My goal as a therapist might be for you to have 4+ out of 5 muscle strength in your biceps for you to be able to do something functionally, when you want to be able to translate that into a functional activity. So we need to make sure that those are on point, they're matching, and we're working towards common goals. I might have something totally different in mind if you don't tell me what your goals are, but a good therapist should be asking what your goals are, making sure they're functional, they're measurable, and then developing a treatment plan with you, and setting some time frames for them, but not being afraid to, one, break those goals into smaller goals. Like Susan said, she only was able to do to the car in the driveway. Well, that's a great goal, because if you couldn't get out of bed and you can now walk to the car, then you've made progress that we can measure. Same thing with, starting at the track or something level and then progressing to greater distances. When you feel like you can easily do that distance, then maybe put a gradual incline or decline in there to make it a little more interesting, a little more of a challenge. And there's nothing wrong with changing a goal or, again, breaking it down into something smaller or giving yourself more time. Keeping active is a great thing. Those endorphins that are released in our body is part of what makes us feel good, whether you're in the outdoors or even if you're inside exercising. There are chemicals in our body that are released when we exercise that do make us feel better. And there's something to be said for, just having that outdoor experience, being in a place that's visually appealing, and your environment that you were happy with before you got sick. So I think a lot of that plays into mental health, getting those chemicals running through the body. But if you're having a day that isn't good, don't beat yourself up because you didn't get out and do something. Maybe your body needed a rest that day, and it goes back to knowing your body, how you're feeling, and giving yourself a little bit of grace in there and saying, okay, I'm going to take today off, because not every day has to be an exercise day, but I'm going to do tomorrow, I'm going to do this, or set a goal and say I'm going to do something and continue my progression. And with Millie talking about it and Christine heading into surgery, anytime you can be proactive and be in better shape before you're going to have an elective surgery or know that you're going for a procedure like chemotherapy, the better condition you're in, obviously, the much more easily you handle that disruption to your system of having the surgery or the treatment with chemotherapy. There's just wonderful things that can be said about being proactive and being ahead of that curveball. Patients that I see always do better when they have been healthy, active beforehand, whether it be an elective surgery or some sort of catastrophic illness or injury. So those are definitely things in our bag that we can use. And diet certainly plays into it. Some people have totally changed their diet knowing they're going into chemotherapy. I have a cousin that was supposed to be dead. Well, let's see, I'm 56. She's 6 months younger than me. She was supposed to only have 2 years lifespan when we were 18 years old, and she is still alive and kicking. She became a total vegan, and she really gives credit to that change in diet being part of what helped her get through her recovery and be here still to speak to us about it. So once you've met those goals, though, that you initially set, make some new goals. Don't let it stop you. And you know, if you're not achieving a goal with the way you're doing something now, come have a discussion with that therapist or that provider and find out what's another way I can work towards this, or what is something I can do to get around this obstacle. Are there assistive devices? Are there tools that I can use? Is there a different type of intervention that we haven't talked about that maybe I can be doing somewhere else or on my own to help improve this? So I think those are kind of some guidelines that you could go with.
Great, thanks. Thank you, Andrea. Something else that I thought I would ask both Christine and Millie, and for Andrea to comment on, because both of you kind of touched on some things that I think are common for a lot of people that experience chronic conditions, whether it's arthritis or the neuropathy, and that is like some specific things that maybe to work on, like maybe flexibility, or I think, Christine, you mentioned in a previous conversation something like balancing issues, and maybe strength might be something too, because I'm sure, like Millie, with the chemo and the radiation, get really tired and maybe weren't as strong, and that was impacting how you were hiking and participating. So are those some things you'd like maybe Andrew to talk about a little bit, and some things that we can do, maybe some general things that we can do to improve our balance, endurance, strength, flexibility, those types of things while you're in recovery, or not, just getting ready to just generally to prevent injury, maybe, perhaps.
Sure, and that's
Okay.
part of why we do see a physician before we start therapy or other new activities or resume an activity. You really should have that clearance from your physician to say, yes, your body is okay with this. It's not something that's going to be detrimental or harmful to you, and make sure that you've got the general blessing to go ahead from there, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody can benefit from strengthening, flexibility. Those are all great things. Both Millie and Christine have things that impact balance. Besides, we're all aging, day older every day. Our body's shape changes, our center of gravity changes, which affects our balance. Having an illness or an injury that causes neuropathies or pain, having a surgery like a hip replacement, they all affect something called proprioception. And that's your body's ability to sense its position in space. And earlier, Susan, you were talking about the mindset of planning ahead of where you're going to put your foot, or Millie, you said you weren't always sure of your footing. That's proprioception, and you may have sensory changes, or it may just be a change within the joint itself from the surgery that's not giving you the feedback that you used to get from the contact with your foot touching the ground, feedback from that nerve going up to your brain, and the brain instantaneously processing it and saying, this is where I need to correct to make sure I don't lose my balance. So all of those things are affected by the chemicals in your body, or the interruption of the nerves from the surgery, those kind of things. So a general strengthening program is great, but it's not always a strength issue. You guys were talking about endurance and fatigue, and people sometimes try to equate endurance and muscle strength as the same thing, and they're not necessarily. You can have a patient that has a 5 out of 5 muscle strength, but fatigues after walking a quarter mile, even though they have great strength. So there's a difference between those two things. Everybody's, of course, a little bit different in where you should be working on balance and that kind of thing. I wouldn't want to give real general activities to somebody without knowing what's wrong with them and getting a little bit more information. But there can be things done from a sitting position that affect balance versus somebody standing up on a wobble board and trying to throw a ball. Everybody's level of ability is going to be different, especially where you start at, and then you can progress from there as you're recovering. The high school athlete that had an ACL tear and a repair is probably going to be the kid on the wobble board throwing the ball pretty quickly, where those of us that have had a knee replacement and maybe weren't in great condition to start with are going to be just progressing from two-legged activities to maybe a single-leg standing activity, just to see if you can even balance like a flamingo kind of thing. So there's a huge variety of balance and proprioception activities that can be done with people. Children that have sensory processing issues, that if you look those kind of things up, they actually overlap, and they're very closely related, because it's all a sensory processing issue when it comes to proprioception and balance. So it's kind of interesting if you Google those things and look at them. As far as flexibility, if we're not moving around, we start losing our flexibility in our muscles and joint range of motion and that kind of thing. So having a stretching program, either figuring out on your own if you're not going to a provider of where you're having tightness, and looking at exercises or stretches that you can be performing to increase that muscle length or regain range of motion where you've lost it. And of course, if you're going to a therapist, they should be catching that on evaluation, that you've lost hamstring length because you've been sitting for 4 months post-op and you are stuck in that position, basically. And when you have shortened muscles, it starts throwing off that center of gravity, your balance by how your joints are stacked on top of each other, basically, those building blocks. If they're no longer balanced in a straight stack, they start pulling us in different directions, and that, again, can cause us to lose our balance. So those are a lot of different things that you can look at, of course. A lot of information in a very short time, though.
Well, I think with hiking and, especially when I was still in treatment and having some of those pins and needles and stuff, that footwear can be really important. I found just in general, comfortable shoes are good, but ones that are really kind of zero drop, so there's not much, if any, heel on them. And also for me and for hiking, you want a good tread, but a wider toe box that lets your toes spread out also helps you sense the ground and feel more confidence as you're walking. And, I did, while during treatment, I always took my poles just to be safe. I mean, there's places I used to hike then with poles that I don't really need them now and didn't need them before. But, during that time, I wasn't afraid to pull them out on fairly easy terrain just as a backup, because I really didn't want to fall.
That's a good point, Millie. I think you mentioned your footwear and the use of hiking poles. And it sounds as if your choice in footwear changed because your conditions and your needs changed. And I think that's something else that we need to keep in mind, is to be very adaptable and stay in connection with our body and what our needs are. I think, Christine, you also mentioned the use of hiking poles as well. And actually, so do I. In fact, I have mine here. These are collapsible poles, so they telescope, so they go to the length that I need. So these, when they're this small, when I have them collapsed down, I just stick them in my pack. And when I get to a point in the terrain that's maybe a little more strenuous, maybe there's more rocks that we have to jump over, scramble over, then, or if it's in the winter and there's a lot of icy patches and things like that, these will come out. I'm not afraid to pull them out and set them up and use them to help me maintain that balance. These hiking poles are pretty typical for, those that hike a lot, but they're not the only type. Some people, and those are two-handed hiking poles that really help with the balance. Some people are fine with just a single pole, like something like this. You can see it's pretty long, but it has a nice rubber tip at the end that helps it when it contact with the ground. It has a strap that you can put your hand through to help you, so that you don't lose it. But some people find a single hiking pole or staff to be helpful. And the staffs also can be kind of fun. If it's a wooden staff, a lot of places sell hiking medallions that you can attach to them and you can show where you've been. You don't have to look at them as an indicator that you are in some way not able to do something. It can be used as a fun way to show where you've been and what you are doing. I think you both have pointed out some interesting things. I was wondering if there was anything else, maybe clothing wise or other equipment that you might have changed up as you guys were journeying through your conditions, or if you have any plans to make further adjustments other than maybe footwear or use of hiking poles. Is there anything else as you continue on this journey, what you might consider different? I know I now also always have first aid kit in my pack and electrolytes and some other things to warrant off other issues. But Christine, do you have anything you'd like to share with the group on that?
Just like a little bit of my clothes, just because of it's harder for me to put on my pants. So, make sure that it's very flexible. And then I'm able to get on my pants and that. But other than that, I don't think so.
So have you chosen clothing now that has a lot more stretch
Roomy.
to it, things like
Yeah.
that too?
Yeah.
And have you also, do you tend to use more dry weave fabrics that are quicker to dry and things like that?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Yeah, I find that those types of fabrics and stuff do allow ease and movement,
Mm-hmm.
especially the quick drying too, because then it's lessens the opportunity for chafing.
Yeah.
Fabrics that stay wet are going to chafe you and it's not fun. So yeah, good point. Millie, do you have anything other than the shoes in the poles that maybe that you've
The only thing I can think of, and it's not really related, it's more related just to me and my shape and stuff, because I have very narrow shoulders, and I find that I'm more comfortable with short hikes, where I'm not carrying a whole lot, that I'm more comfortable with things strapped around my waist than using my shoulders. So I'm a big fan of the water bottles in the fanny pack and things like that. That's just more comfortable for me personally. But Susan keeps telling me a well-fitted pack would put the weight on my hips. And one day I'm going to trust her on that and try it and do some backpacking. But right now, for most of I'm just doing day hiking, so I'll put all kinds of stuff around my waist and not really notice it. So that could help somebody, especially if somebody's wanting to hike, but like they have shoulder injuries or something.
And I think that's a good piece of advice, and thank you for sharing that, because I think sometimes we tend to have a vision of what a hiker should have, or what they should look like, or what they, and the fact of the matter is, go with what works for you. And if you're more comfortable with a fanny pack, and they make some really cool Explorer packs that fit around the waist, it doesn't necessarily have to be, a day pack that sits on your shoulders. Maybe it's a one strap that kind of goes around or around your waist. And I think that's an important point, that you need to go with what works for you. Same with clothing. I mean, there are traditional hiking pants. Of course, for women, we don't have enough pockets. We still need to talk to somebody about that. But some people like the stretchier legging type of a hiking pant. They like tank tops versus t-shirts, or somebody like long sleeve. Some people like button up. And hey, you know what? It doesn't really matter as long as it works for you, it's protecting you, or you can easily move in it. What's most important is that you're out there and moving. I also wanted to talk a little bit about what you both see in terms of any ongoing regimen, or like Christine, as you get ready for surgery, have you changed your regimen at all, or have any plans of how you're going to get through that recovery process? I know you have big plans with continuing with school and changing your career to be fully in the outdoor recreation therapeutic arena. So how is this going to, how is those plans going to help pull you through, and what have you got planned for that?
Well, right now I'm just kind of basically taking it day by day. I need to lose 30 pounds before they will even do the surgery. So I'm working on getting that. So I'm changing my diet, watching what I eat. I'm also like doing some other exercises and that, and just trying to do it day by day. I do have my long-term goals and that, but right now I'm just really taking it day by day.
Well, that's a good point to make too. And I think that's something that Andrea talked about, is to break down those goals. And if that's a day-to-day goal, then that's a success. Yeah. And it's nice though that you have those long-term goals, because it does help, I'm sure, give you those motivation on those moments when you're like, oh, forget this, but yet you see something you're really passionate about and want to do, and it'll help you get through. Millie, what about you? Do you have any ongoing regimens or things that, since you've recovered and received that clean bill of health, but have you learned something from that you're carrying through in your ongoing health care?
Well, I mean, just like I said earlier, to really appreciate each day and get out there and enjoy and experience the beauty that we have around you. I have to admit, it was hard during COVID not to backslide a little bit. I did put on some weight that I'm trying to take off. I did keep hiking and active, but not quite enough to counterbalance the amount of ice cream I was eating. So, a little comfort ice cream's got to make way now. But I guess one thing I really like from it is, I'm a mother, and my kids are now teens and 20-somethings, and I love that they will ask me to hike with them or go kayaking with them, and they don't hesitate to pull me in with some of their friends. And I'll hesitantly say, "Are you sure?" And they're like, "Don't worry about it, Mom. You can keep up." And I love that my kids are proud of me and feel confident that I can keep up with them on my little short hikes, because I know they'd probably go faster without me, but that they want to experience it with me is really really makes me feel good. And I feel like I'm maybe setting a good example for them in doing those things and making the time for it and doing it with them.
Awesome, thank you. I wanted to shift a little bit, and this will answer one of the questions. I know Q&A doesn't start for a few minutes, but one of the things we did want to share with our audience are some resources and local resources of what you can find in the Valley, of places that you can safely start out slowly walking, just to start moving. So I know, Christine, you have a really cool program through the Blue Ridge chapter of the PATC. Maybe you'd like to share what that program is and where you meet and how frequently and how people can connect with you.
Well, so the program is called SMILE. So it stands for Slow Miles, Low Miles, basically. So we have a lot of course, this was pre-COVID, and we're just starting to get our hiking program back on track. But we had a lot of hikes within the club that were like, 5 miles up to 20 some miles, but we didn't have anything that was like geared towards like the 1 to 5 miles. So I decided to do this program and like really get to the people that don't want to hike a 3 mile in 1 hour, that want to just get out there and enjoy themselves, whether it's just a mile an hour, or if it's 3 miles 6 hours. It's just basically just walking at a slow pace. I'm hoping to get the program started up this fall.
And where do you normally meet? Like where would you go? Because I'm assuming if you're going at the lower pace, you're not climbing Signal Knob, but you're maybe wandering through maybe easier terrain. So where would you normally meet?
So we normally go to like Blandy Experimental Farm, because they're a great place. Most of it is all flat, so they're a really great place that we normally do it at. Just around town. There's some trails in Shenandoah National Park that are really pretty even. They do have one handicapped accessible park in Shenandoah National Park, and that is
Limberlost, right?
Limberlost, and so that's a mile loop trail that's really good.
Is that one a paved trail too?
paved as well.
Okay.
They have a couple of the one in Sky Meadow State Park. It's only I think it's 0.3. It's a sensory trail, and that's a really good one that's really like, it's actually a little paved. I go to George Washington National Forest, Storybook Trail. It's another half mile to an overlook, a beautiful overlook and back. And then there's another one back there, Lion's Tail. It's another half mile loop trail. So there's a couple around, and then I go up to Harper's Ferry as well.
Mhm.
So it's basically all over the place.
Great. Thank you. And how can people connect with your program? Do you have a special website or meetup space or something like
We
that?
have a meetup, and I'll post it on the chat.
Great. Thank you. Millie, do you have a favorite flat space or trail that you like to wander through that you can share with people who might be looking for a new place to stroll?
Well, I think the Shenandoah River State Park, also known as Andy Guest State Park, has some wonderful options. One place I really like is to park right down near the river at the entrance to the Bluebell Trail. Bluebell is in the woods. It rolls a little, but it's pretty much level and it's right by the river. But where it comes out, it connects with the river trail and the Colors Trail. Is that it? Yeah, Colors Trail. And those circle a big field where you have some nice, you have the river on one side, you have mountain views, and the field is kind of like a meadow with lots of wildflowers and butterflies and birds. And the thing about that loop is there are cut throughs. So if you want to take an easy cut through, I mean, the Bluebell is a mile. So just doing the Bluebell and back is 2 miles. But once you get to the loop part, you can go to the first cut through and it ends up being about 3 miles, or you can go to the next one and it's like 4 miles. And then there's a cut through that's 5 miles. And if you want to go all the way down to, I think it's Indian Hollow Road and back, it's almost right around 7 miles. So depending on how much time, how industrious you are that day and what your energy level is, you can, it's like the old choose your own adventure books. It's, choose your own hike books. You can have as much woods versus meadow as you want. And there's also people who bike there. So that's another good place for biking. And then there's lots of other short things in state park and town parks and greenway trails in the area. There's Easton Park in Front Royal and Rockland Park. They both have walking trails. I know there's a lot of stuff up in Winchester. There's trails in Woodstock. So, all around wherever you are, you're probably not more than 10 or 15 minutes from some place that could get you started with a shorter, pleasant walk outdoors somewhere.
Great, thank you. Andrew, do you have some places that you'd like to suggest and some resources for our guests? For our audience?
Yeah, and I would agree with both Christine and Millie. There are lots of local things. Everybody's town park seems to have some sort of a trail. Some of them are a little bit hilly. They're more of a athletic trail. But there are usually some flat spots walking around a sports field that's already established, like a soccer field if there's no track. The Storybook Trail, just for those that don't know, the Massanutten Storybook Trail is in Page County at Newmarket Gap. It's handicapped accessible. It is paved. Christine said it's a gorgeous view, but it's very accessible. The same thing as Millie mentioned, the Andy Guest State Park has great trails. There's also a handicapped accessible trail there that I can't tell you the name of. We take our little Cub Scouts on it though.
It's the Cottonwood Trail.
Yeah, and it's got this really cool section. It's not paved, but it's got this wooden bridge almost that goes in a big loop, and it's really cool. The kids love it. So that's kind of different. I like that. The Hawksbill Greenway in Luray, where I lived before I moved to Broadway, is a great resource, and it follows the Hawksbill Creek. It actually has a couple more recently added wheelchair accessible fishing spots that you can kind of roll out closer to the water and fish from. So it's nice that there's not just, people aren't just having to think about, I can walking, but what can I do that is accessible to other people that can't get out and walk but still would like to be outdoors. I think those are the things I had on my list.
Great. I think it's also interesting to mention fishing, both at Andy Guest State Park and even along the Shenandoah and Front Royal from by Eastham Park. See a lot of people fishing along there. And the park in Eastham in Front Royal is connected to the Royal Greenway in town. And you can actually go from Eastham Park, and if you follow it, you can go all the way to downtown, or you can even end up in Shenandoah National Park. So it is connecting. I know there's some plans to add a connector trail from the Appalachian Trail that crosses Route 522 in Front Royal. They're going to connect that trailhead to downtown. And from what I understand, that's going to be a paved access as well. We'll see how those plans develop. I know that there's a new wellness trail up by the new Warren Memorial Hospital. I haven't walked it yet. I think, Millie, you've experienced it. Is that a place that people might find accessible? It looks like it goes up a hill, but I'm not sure. Could you maybe give us a little feedback on your experience there?
Well, there are two overlooks, and the lower overlook is not that far in. It's a little bit uphill, but I think it would be pretty easy to get to. The upper overlook, I didn't find it very bad, but if, I have been doing more hiking lately, so the upper overlook, depending on your fitness level and your determination, you just have to kind of go and experience it. When we were hiking it, there were people running up it and down, and we were all saying, oh, I couldn't run this because there's too many ankle twisting size rocks on the path. But it is very beautiful. It has gorgeous views. And the lower overlook is probably only like half a mile in and back out, and it's not very steep to get to that one. So it would be worth trying out.
Great. And of course, I have a special affinity for the Dickey Ridge Trail, where there's a trailhead for that right near the entrance to Skyline Drive. It is a popular trail, but it's kind of meanders. There's not a lot of ascent to it until you get to like the 1.5 mile cement marker. So that's where I started my recovery, and that's when I resumed physical activity and hiking. That's where I went. And there's like a little bridge that crosses the stream. It's maybe 1/3 of a mile in, not quite. Like that was in the very early days, that was my goal. It took weeks to get to the bridge. And then for a while, I would get to the bridge and I would sit and just, relax before I returned back to the trailhead. So that's another place. I think that first 1.5 miles is it's reasonably, there's 1 or 2 places it goes up, but I don't think it's strenuous at all. I would call that an easy hike to do. And just for those of us who are joining us tonight, we're going to put all of these places to go on a resource sheet. And I know in Winchester there are a lot of places and parks to access to. I'm sure Barbara will include those in the resource sheet that we send out. We did talk a little bit about adaptations or other devices that we could use. And so what we can do at this point, I'm just checking. Let's see. Oh, there is another question. I think we've answered most of it about where someone could go to hike for a novice. Another question was what kind of group hiking organizations exist. And I can tell you there are a lot of group hiking organizations, Bill. Some of them, obviously the Blue Ridge chapter and their hiking, the PATC has a lot of guided hikes. You can go onto their website, I think it's patc.net, and see what kind of hikes they have there. On Facebook, you'll find, and on Meetup, you'll find a whole number of different groups that meet a lot of different needs or abilities. Like there's scrambled legs and kegs, and there's the Northern Virginia hiking group. There's a number of women's hiking group, including Wandering Soul Sisters, the Trail Tribe, Hike Like a Girl. There's just a whole number of organizations that you can connect with. And my best suggestion would be is to, you know, join them on a hike and see, you know, if your personalities mesh. Are they doing the type of hiking you want to do? Do they maybe have a subgroup for people that want to go on shorter or slower paces? Some groups, they really crank out the mileage. It's pretty impressive to see these large group of people and what they're doing. And, you know, that's great. But don't be afraid to shop around, you know, search in the area for that. I think I may have a list of some local groups, and we'll put that in the resources as well to at least give you a starting point. And the other thing is, don't be afraid to, if you end up at a rehab center or, you know, you're talking with friends in your neighborhood, don't be afraid to ask somebody, hey, you want to go for a walk? I have a friend in my neighborhood, and we meet every morning at 6 and just walk around the neighborhood just to start off our day. And, you know, it works out really well. Sometimes it's just having one other person to keep you accountable and to walk with. It just makes it a lot more fun. Let me see if so that answers that question. Barbara, were there any other questions that came in through Facebook while we were chatting?
A few, we did have a few, thank you. An easy hike was mentioned by a few people, is behind the Bowman Library, which is in Stevens City on Tasker Road. It's paved, it's easy parking in front of the library, and the entire walk is maybe 15 minutes, and it's nice and level. People walk their dogs, I've seen with walkers, pushing strollers, and it's easy to get in and out of there. And then if you have a book to pick up at the library, and it's all set. Somebody also commented that they like you, they are a big fan of hiking poles, zero drop, and big toe box shoes was some of their favorite things to use when they're hiking. A couple questions, well, several questions about advice on where to start as a novice, or a couple people that are aging and don't have quite the stamina that they used to, but I think those were covered very nicely by a lot of you, and we can put that in the resource guide. Flexibility, I think you talked about that, Andrea. Is just something to kind of do each time? You recommend each time somebody begins their hike, or be pre-hike, or what's your suggestion?
So I've been doing this a long time, and there's different theories out there and which way, what order we should do things. So it used to be that we would tell people to stretch and then go do your activity. Now it's more of a mindset of go out and warm up a little bit doing your activity and then do some stretching so that the muscles and tissues are warmed up. Either works. Just don't be super aggressive. When you do stretch, you want to go to the point where you feel a pull or a tight feeling stretching and not causing pain. Pain is not our goal typically. There will be, Christine will have some when she gets her hip replacement, but it's not necessarily that no pain, no gain mindset that we need to be going through unless we've had an elective surgery for a joint replacement. That's kind of normal. And we'll tell the patient to have their pain pill before the therapist comes about an hour ahead. But as far as flexibility, when you stretch, you need to make sure it's a long, slow hold. You don't bounce. You don't try to do something that lasts 1 or 2 seconds. It should be at least 10, 15, 30 seconds or longer. It doesn't need to be a lot of repetitions like an exercise that you're trying to do for strengthening. Flexibility, if you think about it like a rubber band, if you take a rubber band and stretch it out, let it go back, it'll go back to its normal length. If you take a rubber band and stretch it long enough, far enough, it'll actually distort, something called tensile strength, which is the point where something will distort from its normal length. We're looking to use that to gain length. Muscle is one of the few tissues that has the ability to shorten and to lengthen. But it needs that long, slow, sustained stretch if it's a muscle length. If it's something that you've lost range of motion at with a contracture from scar tissue or something like that, that might be where you need a therapist to work with you a little bit more on how we can stretch the connective tissue or the scar tissue in a controlled manner. Sometimes it's a surgical thing, sometimes it's under anesthesia, but those are not the things we really want to have to worry about. We want to make sure that we contain or can maintain or increase our flexibility or not lose it by becoming sedentary as much as possible. So activity throughout life is important, and doing things that will, if you notice you're getting a little tight, you can't get the thing up out of the cupboard. We stop putting things up high in the cupboard. We put them down lower because we can't reach them. So we're accommodating for that loss of motion by making something easier to reach. Well, we're probably then going to make it hard, more of a problem, because then we're not putting our hand over our head anymore. So keeping that in mind. Now, if you have a physical limitation that you can't function within, then you need to adjust those shelves or whatever to put your more commonly used things where you can reach them. That just makes sense. But try not to lose that range of motion, but when you do work on it, making sure it's long and slow, stretches, and not painful.
Oh, great advice. Thank you, Andrea. Barbara, do we have any other questions that we can address?
It's a kind of a general question about hydration, and maybe Millie and Christine, is water enough? Does someone need, should it be Gatorade? Should it be pH infused? Is tea, are there guidelines or how to go with hydration? Yeah, Susan?
Well, I can say as a hiker, and it doesn't matter what time of the year you're hiking, hydration is really, really important. Particularly in the summer, something that I encourage fellow hikers to do, and this comes from my wilderness first aid training, and Andrea can either correct me or share some other ideas, is the use of electrolytes. And very particularly hot and humid day, before I even leave the house, I kind of, pregame it. And I will do 8 ounces of water with electrolytes, and followed up, I shoot it with another 8 ounces of water. And I will carry extra electrolytes with me, so that if I am on a particularly long hike, or if I'm backpacking, particularly when I'm backpacking, but if I am on just a long hike and I know I'm not, it's going to be well into the afternoon, I will have electrolytes again, like at 2 in the afternoon. So I typically will start a hike at 8:30 in the morning, and we'll hike, if I'm doing a long hike through the day. And so then again at 2, I will do more electrolytes. And that's something too in the winter, I think people don't realize, is that dehydration can contribute to conditions of hypothermia quicker. So it is really important to stay well hydrated. And there's a number of different electrolytes, and that might be something that you talk with your doctor about, like what product is best for you, because there's so many, and there is some controversy about Gatorade and Powerade and things like that. Maybe Andrea can talk more on that point.
Yeah, of course, electrolytes are something that is inherently in our body. And if you have a medical condition, especially looking at cardiac conditions, sometimes the electrolytes are not something that you should have an excess of. So you might want to have that discussion with your physician in that sense, whether you should really be supplementing with that. Maybe it's already something you're taking in a medication or a supplement over the counter that they've been prescribed to you because you already had an imbalance, and you certainly don't want to mess that up by adding just a bottle of Gatorade when it might not be what you need. But I agree with Susan, hydration is very important. Most of the time we're all dehydrated. We are not drinking enough fluids. When you start to feel thirsty, you're already dehydrated. If you're dehydrated, especially out in these temperatures that we're having right now, you're going to go into heat exhaustion, hopefully not heat stroke. That's pretty extreme. But we do need those electrolytes in there, and we need to be aware of if we're not eating out on the trail, and this is where the wilderness first aid stuff comes in. If you're not eating out on the trail and you're drinking copious amounts of water, you're going to end up with hyponatremia, or what people call water poisoning or water toxicity. If we're eating normally, the average human American diet and trail foods and those kind of things have plenty of electrolytes in them, way more than we actually need typically, actually. So in that case, you're probably okay. But if you're getting out on the trail and you're hiking and you're not hungry and you didn't eat those little salty peanuts that you brought with you, and you just think, I'm not feeling well, I must be dehydrated, I'm going to drink some more water, it kind of becomes a vicious cycle. And then you end up possibly having cardiac conditions because you've diluted the electrolytes that are normal in your bloodstream to the point where they're not functioning. Your cells can't function without them. And that's when people get in trouble with that opposite direction. The one thing I can tell you, unless you're a soldier out in the desert carrying a 60-pound pack in full combat warfare gear, you don't need a salt tablet. Okay, those are not things that we need. So just keep that in mind. There are extremes of both ends. So that happy medium, water and electrolytes balanced, and again, making sure it doesn't interfere with any medications you take.
Now, can getting dehydrated cause your pulse to be higher and like your oxygen sats to be lower than they normally would be during doing a particular activity?
Sure. Dehydration, of course, your body's working harder to compensate for that lack of fluid that you have. You're losing fluid volume. So your heart has to beat faster to circulate the fluid that you do have in order to keep the system functioning. So you're losing volume in that sense. And then you get vasoconstriction. You're not sweating as well as you normally would, cooling yourself down. And that's where, of course, it can lead into heat exhaustion because again, it's one of those things that becomes a vicious cycle. There are all sorts of symptoms of dehydration, including nausea, vomiting, headaches, just general fatigue. People think that they're just tired. I just need to lie down and rest for a while. It's typically that you're dehydrated and you don't recognize it.
Thanks, Andrew. That's good information. It kind of leads into, Barbara, our favorite question. Because if you're drinking all that water, you might be sweating, but you also are going to have to pee.
Yes.
And it has become a very common question on our program. And usually our audience will come up with the question, or, it just comes up like when Arthur, our rock climbing expert, was camping on the face of El Capitan. Well, how do you take care of your bodily functions? So something I did want to talk about, especially for the gals out there, is using a female urination device. Because if you have any physical limitations, and Christine, like with your hip, you may not be able to squat as well to take care of that particular body function. And what we have found, myself and a lot of the gals I hike with, is a female urination device. It's called the P-Style. And it's plastic. You really, so it's kind of like, it's an open funnel. It's a little bit wider at the end where it makes connection with your body, and then it funnels out. So you can stand, you're actually peeing into the funnel, and it directs the urine stream away from your body. And you don't have to drop your pants all the way down. You don't have to squat. You can just, open or just slide your pants down a little bit, insert it, take care of business. There is another product on the market. It's called a Kula cloth. It's made from special antimicrobial material. You can hang it from your pack. You can use it to wipe afterwards, or you can carry, wipes or toilet paper. Just make sure that whatever you have, you pack out with you. But that's just a little piece of advice on gear that you might want to consider. It's also great. It's not just for hiking or being in the woods. I know people that carry it when they travel, because you go into a public restroom and you take one look and you're like, I'm not sitting on that. Or you're trying to figure out, how do I squat without touching anything, right? And this is a great way to safely use public restrooms as well. So it's not just for when you're in the backcountry, but that's something else that, particularly for the ladies, if you're having some mobility issues, you can't squat, or if you just want a little more privacy, it's something you can look into. There's a number of them. P-Style is popular, the Shiwi. you can, just Google it and a whole bunch of different options will come up. Amazon covers a lot. Mountain Trails carries, I think, the Shiwi. So you do, and you can also get little carrier packaging for them, so you can put all your items in there. I keep mine in a little packet with a little hand sanitizer, and I have the cooler cloth that hangs off the back of my pack. It makes for those stops a lot easier to handle. We also, is there any other gear that anybody would like to share? Is there any other questions, Barbara?
No, that takes care, that kind of groups all the questions together.
Great.
So, Millie,
I would like to mention 2 other potential uses for hand sanitizer if
Sure.
you're really traveling light. And one of them, I mean, I don't know that this has been scientifically proven, but it wouldn't hurt if you accidentally brush against some poison ivy or something to use hand sanitizer, which is alcohol based, and try to wipe that area off. It might help keep you from getting a rash. And also, if you get some kind of like little minor cut or scrape and don't happen to have a first aid pack with you, the hand sanitizer could help be, an easy, like you've already got it, maybe you put that on your cut. And I got a little minor bee sting recently, and I put hand sanitizer on it, and it seemed to take the burn out of it. So anyway, that's my hacks. They may not be the best. Susan will tell you if I'm wrong, but those seem to be.
It's interesting with COVID, we carry hand sanitizer. I have it hanging from my pack. It's just a habit that I think we've all gotten into, right? We have it in the counter, we have it in the car, and now it's in our packs. And I brushed up against some stinging nettle when I was out in the park and put some hand sanitizer on it, and wouldn't you know, I didn't sting so much. So there may be some truth in whatever the components are of the hand sanitizer that are helpful in that regard. So good point. Andrea also provided us, we have a few minutes before 8 o'clock, and I know Andrea provided us with some photos of some adaptive devices that maybe we could share that just in case there are some people who just to get an idea of what's available, so that, even if they're just interim solutions while you're recovering from surgery or something like that, what might be available for your use. So Andrea, I'll let you talk and just let me know when to scroll through as you describe these different things.
Sure. Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. So the top left is a kind of a rugged, what we call rollator type walker. So somebody that's had a joint replacement has progressed past the standard walker, or just has had mobility issues. This might be a great alternative or progressive device for you. It has really big wheels that are meant to be able to go over more bumpy terrain. And it has that nice built-in seat that can be helpful if you need to stop and take a break so that you can finish what you've set out to do, and complete that hike or walk on those accessible paths. On the right is it's kind of I call it the beach dune buggy. So somebody that wants to go to the beach and doesn't have mobility, whether it's somebody that's typically wheelchair bound, or maybe it's somebody that just has had surgery or complications that debilitated them for a short time, but the family's going to the beach. It's something that can be used to, one, it can go into the water, and 2, it can get over bumpy areas, and it goes through the sand without bogging down.
Awesome.
The next one down is just showing that there really aren't limitations. If you really want to do something, there's a bunch of these that I put in there. There's a bunch of pictures with people that are amputees and have prosthetics. The first guy is mountain climbing, rock climbing, with an above the knee amputee. The next one down is a female that's running with a running blade prosthetic. It has a lot more spring to it and has that space that's better for running. It's just one of the more advanced, more futuristic running devices that people would see, compared to what I came out of school in '88, that didn't exist. So technology has changed a lot with prosthetics. It's very cool. And down from there, I can't quite see. Okay, so again, amputees. Again, there's no limit. They make devices for amputees that allow you to have a swim fin. There's a prosthetic on the lady on the right that she's cycling with. It still has a clip that goes into her toe clips on the bike pedal, just like her other shoe. So again, no limits there. We talked about hiking poles for stability. Well, there's a one-legged skier. That's an amputee that has outriggers, and there's actually little skis on those poles, and so that allows them to balance and still have the ability to go skiing. So
How great is
no
that?
stopping somebody. Yeah, it's awesome. And of course, it's not always a leg that's the amputation. So it may be somebody that has an upper extremity amputation or was born without part of a limb. So this is, the top one is more of a basic component. It's above the elbow, obviously, versus the more futuristic looking one down below it. And that one actually shows two different types of prosthetics. There's a hand that looks like it has a pinch grasp capability, which is this kind of motion, and probably has all the fingers capable of moving. But on the other hand, he has a hook, or this kind of pincher, the two fingers coming together to hold things. So just a couple examples of upper extremity amputees and the devices that are out there. And that's somebody that's below the elbow. Going back, or going down to the next one, talking about beach accessibility. There are places that if you Google them, there are beaches that are considered handicapped accessible. Maybe the person can't walk across the sand or can't stand at all, but they can float in the water. They miss the ocean. There are ramps that are built to go into the ocean, whether it be something as fancy as this or some of them are just like a brick path that's been made, but there's some also that are almost like an electrical track, almost like a little train track that takes them down to the water. So there's, if you Google it, there's some really cool things out there for that. Down below that, so somebody that wants to go out on that rough terrain, yes, not cheap, but this is kind of an all-terrain accessible wheelchair for the people that want to go out in the woods, maybe hiking, but possibly are hunters, outdoor enthusiasts for whatever reason, and they want that real rugged chair that has the capability of moving them where they need to go, and they're not capable of pushing a device over that ground. The next one is a couple of kids, and of course this could be for an adult as well, but anybody that has balance issues but still would like to be cycling, they are not just for little kids. There are trikes out there. Of course, we even see them on motorcycles these days that are trikes, if you want to get in that area. So that's a great alternative for people with some challenges. And again, down below that, there's no limit to what you can do. There are both two different types of devices there for archery. The one guy has a strap that he uses that's helping him hold the bow, and he's actually shooting with his foot. And up above, that person is, or next to it, I'm sorry, is using a prosthetic attachment to pull the string back and to release the bow. Down below that is an interesting device where somebody doesn't have mobility. It's one wheel on it, and it allows them to take them out over terrain that you can't go on with a standard wheelchair, but certainly allows them to take them out somewhere where they couldn't normally access. And it's kind of interesting. It's similar to, with the rescue squad, we have what we call a Stokes basket, and in the national park, you'll find the rangers have a wheel that can attach to their Stokes basket, very similar to that, so that people are trying to hike somebody out that's been injured. That one wheel can go on the Stokes basket to make it easier for them to carry, or to have some support actually, so they're not holding the whole weight of that Stokes basket. So kind of neat things there. The next guy is a gentleman that's actually shooting sports. So they're adaptive equipment for being able to hunt or just target shoot, whatever you like. Next to that, we were talking about neuropathies and how it makes it hard to balance. Well, people that have neuropathies in their hands sometimes can't do things that can need fine motor control, like buttoning things or picking things up. And there are all sorts of little gadgets that the local OT could show you for helping. The first one's a button hook, and that just allows you to button your own shirt without somebody having to do it for you every time or always having to wear a pullover type thing. The next one down is a sock aid, where somebody that can't bend at the hip because they're not allowed to after their hip surgery for a certain period of time can put their own socks on, and gives you that freedom to do so. And or you may not have the help to do it. She says she's using it now, so that makes sense because she's already having hip pain. So, and knowing how to do it pre-op sure helps when it comes time for post-op. The next one to the right of that was a card holder. So somebody that has neuropathies or grip strength issues, it's a card holder. It's just a cool thing. There are adaptive equipment for people that don't have good grip strength or maybe don't have any grip strength, and it can be strapped to their hand and it can adapt to a fork, knife, spoon kind of thing, so that they can use more of a scooping motion, and they don't have to have hand control. They maybe have to have elbow or shoulder movement to do it, but they can feed themselves versus somebody having to feed them. Another adaptive device in the kitchen is that, probably can't see it as well, but that apple is kind of, I believe it has some prongs that stick up, and then you can put the apple onto it, brings the knife down. The end of the knife is actually attached to the board, and you put the object you want to cut under it and bring the blade down almost like a paper cutter. And then little things we don't think about, those people, again, with poor grip strength or neuropathies. I have a lot of hand pain myself. I've done too many years of physical work on other people and lots of typing. I find it hard to squeeze nail clippers. I haven't got to the point where I use this yet, but it allows you to put the nail clipper down on a stationary spot and bring your finger towards the clippers and then just be able to push down on it with one finger or multiple fingers versus having to get that squeezing pincher motion. So I just threw in a variety of different things that, you know, obviously there's some extremes of quadriplegic, paraplegics that can't do things for themselves to just some adaptive equipment for everyday. I'm having trouble doing things for myself, like clipping my nails or putting my socks on. So there's tons of things out there. So, and then down below that, I think Susan was just the links to the other. Yeah. So there's a video that we had talked about before this that we thought would be interesting for people to see. Again, there's no limit to what you can do if you want to be outside and have goals. This boy he was a quadriplegic. He wanted to achieve his, I believe he wanted to achieve his Eagle Merit Badge. And he also wanted to be able to rock climb or rappel. So they put their heads together and figured out how this young man could complete his climbing merit badge. He went up and down in the Stokes basket. That's exactly what that is. And they rappelled him down the mountain face or the rock face at Camp Rockinon with that device. So lots of help, obviously, but he was able to achieve his goal. So where there's a will, there's a way. Below that are a couple just articles when I was searching for images that I came across that just talk about people overcoming their barriers. And I think below that was an article about an amputee that was drafted to the NFL. I think there was an article about a gentleman that's an amputee running completing an Ironman triathlon, not just the local 5K, 10-mile bike and mile swim kind of thing. This was a full-fledged Ironman triathlon. And there was one more on there, Susan.
Yes,
Is
and
that correct?
we'll add those to the resource material we send out so that people could
Sure.
read them at their leisure and be inspired, because I think what we wanted to show, as you said, is that nothing's out of reach. And maybe it's just talking with one of these providers or talking to your therapist. They might know of people. If there's something that you always wanted to try and now you're like, oh my gosh, this has happened to me. I've had this surgery, or I have this condition, but I still would love to experience it. Ask a provider, go to one of these outdoor activity providers, and maybe they'd be willing to think outside the box and figure out a way that you two can have that experience. I think the example, that young man at Camp Rock Enon, and I remember when that happened, it was a great day for scouting, but it was really a great day for that young man, and providing that experience for him. And I think a lot of the outdoor providers are willing to do that. It might take a little time to think it through, but like you said, anything's possible, and you provided a great array of adaptive devices that can be utilized, and I'm sure there's a lot more that can be utilized to get out there and enjoy the outdoors. So we're already after 8 o'clock, and we usually try to end around 8, but I did want to invite my guests to share any final words about their journey, or any encouraging words that they'd like to share with the audience as we move forward. Christine, would you like to go first?
Yeah, for me, I always have this motto is just, if you can't do the whole thing, just do what you can and, go from there.
Great, thank you. Millie?
I think I've said before, but just the natural world is so beautiful and has so many benefits to us, physical, mental. Just find a way to get out there and enjoy it, doing what you can, appreciating it. And also, as I said before, the human body was designed and made to move. So the more you can move however you can, but just keep doing what you can and build from that, and it will really enrich your life.
Great. Thank you. Andrea?
We talked about age a number of times, but age really isn't a limit. Susan, you were talking about the woman that you saw at the gym that was in her 80s or in rehab. And I tell my patients they can't call themselves old until they're over 100 at this point, because 100 is the new 70. And everybody has the capability, and as the others were saying, keeping active will keep you going a lot longer, and there are ways to do it if you want to do it. So, and Google's your friend these days. If you can't find a person to tell you about things, just Google it, because there are so many resources and things available out there that we don't even know about.
Great, thank you. And I know that another great place to find information is your local library. And I know, because of what we've done in the past, that Barbara has already gone through the library's resources at Hanley and have pulled some relative resources that'll be available on one of the kiosks in the library. So go on down and see what she's pulled and see if anything's of interest. I would like
some to I'll add a few to the resource page too, a few ideas that hopefully will help. So.
Awesome, thank you. And that too, as you know, tonight's program is recorded and will be available on the YouTube channel for Hanley Regional Library in a few days. And then you can re-review this and look at the resources that were here, as well as a thank you email with all of these resources that we've talked about will be emailed to everybody who registered for this program. I personally would like to thank Millie and Christine and Andrea for their expertise and for generously sharing their stories with us. I think it takes a lot of courage to share such personal stories and journeys of their pain, their suffering, and their triumphs. And I pray that all of you continue with good health. Christine, I hope your surgery goes well and that you recover well and that you're successful in your professional career choices as well. And Andrea, thank you too. I hope to see you soon up at camp. And to our audience, thank you again tonight for joining us, sharing in the journey in the outdoors. I'm looking forward to seeing you all in the future where we continue to explore the outdoors. We will be chatting with some of our organizations that bring our youth into the outdoors. We'll be getting a recap of the hiking season on the Appalachian Trail because let me tell you, it has been a year like no other. The bubble is still coming through Front Royal, and normally, you know, it has come and gone, but it is still coming through. So we'll get a recap from all of our local hiking supporters. And also coming up in the near future is we're going to have a roundtable of all the women leaders in the outdoor industry in the Valley. So that'll be a really interesting discussion. So I thank everyone for joining us tonight. And I hope that you've been encouraged and motivated and inspired to keep moving, to keep getting outdoors, and to keep exploring this wonderful valley that we live in. So I hope you all find your trail and hike it. Happy trails. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.